everybody. Today we're going to do a quick dive into what many consider to be one of the most beautiful collection of writings the world has, which is called the Old Testament. Now, the Old Testament is many things. It is a collection of stories and law, books of wisdom, books of poetry, but ultimately they give us a grand picture of God the Father. Now, there's many names that were given, like El Shaddai and Elohim, Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Rapha, many names, but I want to make this simple for you. And I think the Old Testament exists as a framework to show us that God is faithful. He's a faithful God, and he's trustworthy as he stands by us whenever we make our mistakes, whenever we, as men and women do, we fall. And yet he is there, ever faithful to us. Now, the Jews and the Israelites, the way that they refer to the Old Testament is called the Tanakh. And the Tanakh is the Old Testament broken up into three different sections uniquely. The or the Torah, or the books of law, are Israel's 5-book foundation story that were given through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. The second portion, the or the Nevi'im, or the books of prophets, are historical books written from the prophet's point of view, Joshua, Samuel, Kings, but they also include poetic books as well of the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, etc. Lastly, we have the Ketuvim, or the Ka portion of the Tanakh, which is the general writings. And the general writings are collections of poetic books, wisdom books, and additional historical books that we have that round out the Bible. So think of Psalms and Proverbs, or Job and Esther and Ruth, Chronicles, etc. The Bible really breaks down itself into 9 historical periods, starting all the way from the creation story of Adam and Eve, and it brings us all the way into the period where they returned from the Israelites returned from captivity under Persian and Babylonian occupation. So there's a lot of ground covered here. So how do we actually break this down? I was given this tool and I want to give it away to you. And it's called the fivefold pattern of the Bible. This is used to help condense and break down the Bible into bite-sized chunks so that whenever we're reading this dense material, it makes it easy to kind of receive what God wants to give us in the moment. And those 5 are the beginning, deliverance, communion, trial, and consummation. Now, how do we apply this, Pastor Daniel? I want to give you an example from one of my favorite books of the Bible. In the book of Exodus, it's a story of the Israelites, Moses. You guys might be familiar with it. You may not be. But let's break this down, starting at the beginning. The beginning portion has to do with how the Israelites were under persecution because the babies at the time that were under 2 years old were being cast out because they were growing too much as a populace. And the Egyptian rule did not want to be threatened by the Jews. And of course, this is where we get Moses' beginning, where he is given to Pharaoh's daughter via the river Nile and becomes a Egyptian prince. And through his own strength, he tries to alleviate the persecution of his people, and then fails and then runs away. But then we move into step 2, which is the deliverance portion. God says, you failed in your strength. I'm going to go or have you go, but in my strength this time, and I'm going to have you deliver our people. And that's the story of the plagues and the people of Israel leaving Egypt, the river splitting into the Red Sea splitting in two, and then them being delivered into the wilderness. Now, what happens in the wilderness? There's a lot that happens, but part 3, communion, happens next. And that is the deliverance of the 10 commandments given away to the people. The 10 commandments given to the people is God saying, hey, you were one way. I'm going to invite you into being something new by these 10 commandments. But the 10 commandments lead into the trial period, which is the next 40 years. That's eating manna from heaven in the morning. That's dealing with snakes in the afternoon, and then asking God for water in the evening. They went through a lot in those 40 years in the desert, But ultimately, it led them to the consummation, which is, hey, I didn't just deliver you guys just so you can live in the desert, but I'm bringing you into the promised land, which is a place flowing with milk and honey, the land of Canaan. You guys see how, if we break it down with the fivefold, you see how easily it is to absorb an entire book of the Bible. If you do that with other books in this same fashion, I think it's going to help you guys break down the Old Testament in your own personal study. I hope this blesses you, and I hope you guys get to see the Bible in a whole new way. Be blessed.